Marjorie Taylor Greene joins us now. Marjorie, so first, bring us to the floor. President Trump's victory is certified. Such a different energy than 4 years ago. What was that moment like for you?
It was amazing watching Kamala Harris preside over her own defeat. And while I was watching her stand up there, she had her eyes fixed on probably the clock on the wall that sits over the door. The very clock I'm talking about. And she refused to make eye contact with anyone. But I couldn't help but to think, this is a woman that never received a single primary vote during a Democrat primary. But yet here the Democrats and the media constantly talk about January 6th.
Yeah, you saw Joe Biden put out a letter last night really drawing us to the great theme of democracy. And I guess it makes sense that Joe Biden's a big fan of democracy. It was a rather authoritarian swipe that knocked him out of the Democratic primary when they just decided the elites wanted to roll with Kamala instead. But, Marjorie, 4 years ago, you and I were huddled up on this day preparing to make arguments about the affidavits that had been presented in some courts, ignored by other courts. We were combing through the research, and this violence erupts. And you and I investigated for a year thereafter what role the federal government might have had in that. And when we brought evidence forward, when we asked questions and got these odd denials, they called us conspiracy theorists. I wonder what was in your brain when you saw the Inspector General come out and say there were 26 FBI confidential human sources in that crowd. Did you feel vindicated?
Yes, I felt vindicated, but the truth is, Matt, they only released that information after President Trump won the November 5th election with such a giant margin. This government and the people that are controlling it right now would have covered up all the truth if they could continue to do so. But they're being forced to let out information a little bit at a time. And we will be forcing them to let out more soon after January 20th. But I don't think they want the American people to ever know what they did. You think about, let's go back 4 years. Yes, you and I had prepared to handle the objection for Michigan, and we were doing 6 states overall. And this comes after a 2020 election that took place during COVID lockdowns, where they unconstitutionally used absentee ballots. And that's where so much of the fraud took place. But here we had an election in 2024, and I really have to hand it over to all the American people that worked so hard on election integrity, and the people in the Republican Party and the RNC. Everyone dove in and made sure that there was no fraud, no stolen election. So today's election certification here in the Capitol was historically different. It was right. It was just. And you could feel it in the House chamber.
And I'll give your fellow Georgians credit. They were so shamed by some of the very strange events around their election that they improved the chain of custody. They improved signature verification on the ballots. Do you attribute that to this big win that we saw in Georgia, really having the legislature hunker down on election integrity?
I do. It was because state legislators in Georgia, the Georgia GOP, and many people got involved. They've changed our law protecting our elections in Georgia. I still think we should go further. I like paper ballots. I like one-day elections. I like making sure that only citizens are voting and having an ID to prove it. I think we can do more to make sure our elections are safe. But yes, absolutely. That's why we won Georgia. And we won Georgia because of President Trump and his campaign agenda that he told the American people he promised, and the American people delivered a mandate. But I have to tell you, I'm pretty sickened today, Matt. You know how the press is. They've always got to drill in their questions with their agenda that they have lined up for today. So you should have heard them today. You would have been hit with these questions. They said to me, "Oh, Marjorie, what do you have to say to Democrat lawmakers who their feelings are hurt and they're feeling sad today on the 4-year anniversary of January 6th? Or Marjorie, what do you have to say to Capitol Police officers who were hit with violence 4 years ago today?" And my answer back, Matt, was, how about the police officers that endured BLM Antifa violence every single night in the summer of 2020? And for those Democrat lawmakers that have their feelings hurt, I could care less. But, it's Joe Biden today that released 11 terrorists from Yemen and sent them back to Oman. So, the truth is, we know who the Democrats are. They are not for the American people, and they will continue to try to cover it up, and the media will lie for them every single time.
Marjorie, so many people have this view of you, this tough, hard-charging Congresswoman. You take on any foe, any battle that you feel is appropriate and righteous. But I've also seen the very nurturing side of you with a lot of these January 6th families, the mothers, the defendants. You spend time on the phone with these folks. You've talked to many who are incarcerated about their experience to try to help them. What can you share with my audience about the hope that exists within this community that there will, in fact, be pardons on day one?
You know, I think, and you've spoken with them and been in the trenches with them, just like I have. The truth is, these people are hanging on by a thread right now, and they are on their knees praying that President Trump will pardon them, and they are hoping and praying they get their lives back. But they won't get their lives back. What has been done to them should have never happened in America, and it is completely wrong. And the Department of Justice announced today that they're going to charge 200 more people for January 6th before President Trump is inaugurated. So that's 200 more people that will be raided by the FBI, arrested, and charged by the Department of Justice. And it is an unbelievable sickness of political weaponization. And they are continuing to do this, and they'll do this literally until we drag them out of their offices after we inaugurate President Trump.
Yeah, it really draws a sharp focus on how important it is to get people like Kash Patel into the FBI. Richard Haas was on Fareed Zakaria's program, and he talked about Kash as the most dangerous person potentially in the Trump administration. Take a listen.
Which appointment worries you most in the Trump?
Kash Patel at the FBI, given its reach within the society. I think I wouldn't call the danger in terms of Mr. Heggs. I actually think that's the hope, that if he were to get defense, in a funny sort of way, the uniformed military and the civilians in the department, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, would be a constraint. So I'm actually less worried about that. I'm more worried about the ability of someone to weaponize the Justice Department.
So they think they can constrain Pete, but not Kash. What do you think, MTG?
I think that's hilarious. They actually use the words weaponize the Justice Department. I think Kash Patel is going to go down as literally probably the greatest, or one of the greatest people that President Trump appointed to serve in his next administration. And I am just here to watch him in action and watch him work. He can't get started quick enough, but he sure does have a mess on his hands. That FBI has been totally corrupted, and they only serve to protect themselves.
There is no other Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress. She is one of a kind. She is carrying the torch for so many of the causes that matter to our audience and millions of Americans. Thanks for what you do, Marjorie. We're counting on you to stay on them, okay?
Thank you. We miss you, Matt. We miss you a bunch.
I miss you too. I don't miss that cold weather in Washington. I heard it was pretty gnarly today.